All right, welcome everyone. Another edition of Farm Tank, but we're kind of twisting things up and changing them around a bit here moving forward. It's going to be a tag team duo here of Carter Williams and myself. Carter, as you guys know, you've all met many times, I'm sure, CEO of iSelect, venture funding company that I'm part of. And really what we're going to do is we're going to name this thing. It's going to be run under Farm Tank, and it's going to be Your Outsourced Ag CTO. And it's really going to feature Carter Williams and myself kind of going through talking about some things. What's the latest, greatest, newest things in ag technology? For those who don't know, CTO is your Chief Technology Officer. So I've kind of always leaned on Carter to keep me abreast of what's happening. And Carter and I were kicking around some ideas, and we thought, hell, let's do this on a regular basis, maybe every couple of weeks. Carter keeps us abreast. He's out in Washington a lot, meeting with a lot of people, meeting out in California. He just got back from San Francisco at a big ag tech conference and convention. So I thought nothing would be better than to have your own personal CTO that's kicks as much ass as Carter does on your team every couple of weeks, keeping you abreast of what's happening. Now, as you guys also know, we're rolling out, partnering with iSelect to roll out our investment fund, where people can invest, individual investors, accredited investors can invest, just like I invest, or Andy and any of the other folks you've met through the years, in ag tech startups through Carter's firm. And, you know, we'll get into more of that. We'll have links on here and different things. But how the format's going to go each week or each couple of weeks, Carter and I are going to kind of get on and wrap a little bit and talk about some things. Then Carter is going to invite a guest on of a company that he's looking at and his company's looking at, possibly as an investment or possibly as a game changer coming down the pipe. Carter and I thought this is going to be a win-win for everyone for two reasons. Number one, you can invest in through iSelect and start investing in ag tech startups to gain some exposure there. But also we want people to become a customer possibly of the people that we feature on the show or some of the companies that Carter talks about. I know Carter always quizzes people on what's the first thing that a company needs, and it's customers. So we're hoping we can help get the farm gate opened up a little bit, get people interested in some of the latest technology that may help them and their family, and give the guys and folks and ladies a way to invest in a variety of new ag tech. So Carter, I know you just got back from San Fran. You told me there's some crazy stuff going on in the ag space. There's some new tech. Tell us what you're seeing, buddy.
Yeah, one really cool new technology is a company named Climax Food, which is sort of an interesting name for it. But what they can do is duplicate cheese with plant-based. And this is actually something we've been looking at for a long time. You know, when you think about Benson Hill, what they're doing is they're using big data and AI to speed up crop development. Then the question is like, can you speed up new food? And meaning like use other resources. So basically it's a Google guy who started this company, sort of crazy, or people thought he was crazy. And he scans the cheese with a bunch of scanners. He then has a computer that knows about 300 plant-based products. The computer runs for like 3 weeks, and it understands taste, it understands fermentation, and it fiddles with these 300 different possible plant ingredients, and then says, here's the recipe for making a duplicate of that blue cheese from these plant-based inputs. And the damn stuff tastes exactly like blue cheese. They do feta, blue cheese, brie, and a bunch of others. They're working on mozzarella. And there has been easily a couple $2 billion spent by people working on other weird fermentation techniques to deal with this that have all failed. And this guy with his computer in a short period of time, he's now, like, apparently last Tuesday, they were thinking about how to make butter and they figured out how to make butter. So it's sort of cool on many fronts. One, it's sort of food science in a computer, which food science is normally a bunch of guys in a lab, like thinking about stuff and fiddling with stuff over years. Now it's 3 weeks to do that. Two, whether you're vegan or not a vegan, once it's plant-based, it just maximizes resources better. You can say, hey, I could go put some cows in and make some milk and go through that entire process. There are a lot of steps there, and that kind of cheese is awesome. But in many ways, this can take other crops that are maybe cheaper or crops that are more available and redirect them and go ahead and make the cheese. And then certainly there are a lot of people who can't eat cheese because they're lactose intolerant. And so there are lots of different reasons why this is an interesting thing on the cheese side, but notionally they can do that with other foods too. So it's just a really big breakthrough.
Hey, couple of things on the plant-based side. I mean, I know a lot of our producers and a lot of people cringe because, you know, they're thinking, oh shit, this is going to be bad for farmers long term, or, you know, livestock people or things of that nature. So, I mean, I suspect the lab-based, plant-based is going to need more, whatever, chickpea, you know, whatever it may be that they're turning and using into in making the cheese. So is that the benefit to the?
Yeah, it's a few things. Yes, you still, these are more plant-based ingredients, so it's very clean label. So for the most part, it's all plants we know. They're a little secretive about what they're using.
Right.
So there may be a few crops in there that are not like really super well known.
Yeah.
But it's all, you know, someone's got to grow these crops.
Yeah.
And when you think about, like, you know, actually China has a genetic predisposition to be lactose intolerant. So it also opens new markets, meaning like, oh, we can do this, produce a cheese and sell into a market that didn't exist before.
I see.
As I do want to say, as investors, sometimes people say, well, you guys are just vegan people or you're just meat people, because we invest in both. And we're sort of an all the above. The big global dynamic that we're paying attention to is there are like 3 billion people moving into the middle class in Asia. And so when 3 billion people move into the middle class, they want more good stuff. They want to stop eating like rice and beans, and they want to eat meat and other stuff. And so our general attitude is, you know, like 1 or 2 meals a week may move more plant-based, but people will also be ordering steaks. And so if we can bring efficiency to that whole system,
Cool.
That's cool. But this technology, when we think about the health issues that we have, metabolic disease, 1.9 trillion spent each year dealing with things in the US, dealing with things like diabetes, is there are a lot of people that are just eating processed food to begin with. Like 50% of our diet is processed food. So if you can make a better, cheaper cheese to people who are not eating it already and give them something healthier, and then they have less metabolic disease. So they're $1.9 trillion each year spent on the healthcare costs related to poor nutrition is $6,000 per person per year in the United States that it costs us to have people be sick because they're eating highly processed food. So it's going to take a little while to figure this out, but in general, I think that these opportunities that are coming up 20 years from now, people will look back and hear sort of the plant-based stuff, and they'll be like, oh, that created a whole bunch of new opportunity. We're still eating meat. And really it'll take share from people who are eating Doritos. So if you're in the Dorito business, you might be in a little bit of a challenge. Or what are those Cheez-Its? Cheez-Its might be.
Remember the pigs that were eating the Oreos?
The pigs eating Oreos. Do you want to tell that story? I'm not going to tell it.
No, we'll talk on that one.
I was just talking to Robert Sparks the other day. So a lot of people here probably know his dad Wilbur, but yeah, that's another story that somebody can ask us when they see us.
Yeah, exactly. So what company in your portfolio that you guys are currently invested in? It could have been an A, B, C, lower round. What are you excited about that you think you're seeing some traction with? Or
well, things like Earth Optics
yeah
are really turning into something interesting. there's a lot of pressure on climate kinds of things, and we're not quite sure. We don't really like enthusiastically invest in anything that's sort of doing carbon offset. And I think a lot of farmers are smart to just take advantage of those dollars if they're available. But what really Earth Optics is getting to is they're really telling you what soil compaction's like. They are figuring out how to monetize carbon if that's available. And so there's a near-term market available for that. But I think long-term, the ability to really understand soil health and the properties around soil health to be able to improve, nutrition really comes from the soil. So if we think about plants and plant-based nutrition or any kind of nutrition in terms of protein, and that really comes from the soil. So improving soil health, I think Earth Optics is doing a really good job of building that market out and the data. And we really are starting to see an opportunity between that and Arable, who's doing data around all the farmland on top, and Tillable a bit from a standpoint of, hey, what's the real value and the production value of this land? We're seeing all those three sort of start to converge at some level where we're really building to some depth that says, we have a big data model around the whole thing that's in the farmer's control, and that they can understand a little bit more directly. Hey, I can improve yield, taste, nutrition in these ways if I control variables. And the science is turning more into engineering and practice. And so I think that there's a lot of optionality in what Earth Optics is doing in terms of near term if somebody wants to monetize carbon, long term if they want to improve profitability. Which leads a bit to, there's one producer, I'll leave his name out right now, who's got a large, and this is a little bit why I thought Trevor would be interesting to have on a call today, is what he's done is he already produces a lot. He's got a large operation. But what this particular producer did is he teamed up with about 10 other producers, and they've integrated about 100,000 farmland acres into a chicken feed contract. They've disintermediated Cargill a bit, and they've really gone the whole supply chain right to the chicken operation. The other thing they had to do is that chicken operation sort of said, look, we like what you're doing, but our customers are sensitive to a couple things, so we want to make sure you do this with fertilizer. And they had some rules that they wanted. And really this producer's attitude was like, look, if you're going to pay me more or I'm going to make more profit, I'm in. And he integrated that all. And so what we're starting to see is there are entrepreneurial producers that it's not really a co-op, it's sort of a Keiretsu or a teaming up of sort of saying, look, if Whole Foods or one of these people want to have some particular changes to how we produce and is willing to pay for it, we'll do it. And that they're also finding the opportunity to own the whole value chain, or a lot of it, so that that Cargill doesn't get it or ADM doesn't get it, that everybody in the value chain is able to share, so they're able to make more profit and they're able to control and make long-term contracts. And we're starting to see some of the seed companies think about this. There's a wheat co-op that's thinking about, are you familiar with Fairlife? Have you tried Fairlife, Kevin?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so Fairlife used to be a milk co-op, basically. It still sort of is a milk co-op, but they build that branded milk, which then also became like a protein drink for sports enthusiasts. And then they sold the brand, I think, to Coke for like $1 billion. So you're like,
is that dairy you were telling me about? The one that you said was looking at to model?
The what?
What's the dairy you were talking about?
That's that dairy. That's so the Fairlife, all the people in that co-op, I don't know exactly what they made, but they're like, hey, we're working together a co-op. And then they sort of corporatized and got a CEO and really integrated better. And then they developed some novelty in the processing, so brought some tech in. They controlled the whole supply chain. They got closer to the CPG side, and then Coke came along and I think bought them for $1 billion. So everyone's pretty happy.
Yeah. So,
and now people are sort of saying, hey, could I do that for chicken feed, or can I do that for bread? And so we're starting to see what we call more vertical integration going on. Guys like Tillable are starting to get requests from CPGs that are sort of like, where do I find producers that can build this specialty bean? I'm sorry, grow this specialty bean. And you've got producers sort of saying, how do I find the CPGs? I mean, you've got this exchange going on.
Right.
Up that, and I think you've mentioned this in terms of like, how do we build this supply chain?
Yeah. And that has been the bitch. I mean, guys will call, or producers will call and want to know how they can grow for a Chipotle, or they can grow for whoever it may be. And Chipotle is looking for people as well. So sometimes I've been able to be the conduit to that. And I think it is interesting that you said some of the farmers and producers are teaming up to be able to offer maybe more of a package, a full package to the CPG or the end user, and be able to go direct. I think that is going to be big. I mean, I talk to people every day, and almost, multiple people every week, who are trying to build their own brand, Carter, and turn their operation and farm into something where they can go direct and gain more of a premium. I mean, we all know that commodity markets, I mean, it's a commoditized market, and eventually we're going to be back down here when we're going to have $3 corn and, sub $10 beans again. And it's probably not a matter of if, but when. And then people are going to be looking for ways to gain a premium again. So I think
It's not, John Dutton's doing this on Yellowstone, isn't it? Didn't Beth say, like, let's come up with our own online brand for?
You got it. Now, I don't know if we got to take as many people down to the train station or any of that shit like they did on Yellowstone, but who the hell knows?
Business can get brutal at times, but
I guess. Let's get Trevor into the conversation. As most of you know, we started Farm Tank. We started probably about 10 years ago, and maybe 12. It was a spin. Andy and I were throwing, and this is how we met Carter, actually. Andy and I were throwing money at stupid things a lot of times, and we would be in the craziest ventures and adventures, I should say. They turned into adventures. And Andy had met Carter, and Carter's like, my goodness, you guys are idiots, and maybe I can help keep you out of some of this stupidness and craziness. And so Carter, he has
I think I was more polite than that, but
yeah, you were. But in our world, we were like, wow, somebody's got a team that can sit and analyze businesses and business models and help keep us from just throwing money at a lot of stupid things. Well, that'd be great. So we kind of gathered up with Carter, but we started Farm Tank just as a spinoff of Shark Tank. And we were just, instead of Shark Tank where they're investing in everything, Farm Tank was just, we were going to invest some wealthy friends, and we were just going to invest in different ag tech startups or ideas that farmers had. Some of them were just, stuff right out of the shed and out of the barn, and way early. So, we've now tried to become a little more professional and throw money at things that Carter and his team have kind of done their due diligence on. And one of the first guests we're going to have on, Carter and him, I know, are looking at Trevor McKeeman with HitchPin. So Carter, you guys have been talking a little bit. You want to take it from here and introduce Trevor and Carter? Let's see what you guys got.
Yeah, Trevor, do you mind just like give us as I said, we're trying to figure out how to integrate the supply chain more effectively. And if I'm a producer trying to figure out how to find customers, or I'm a CPG trying to work with a producer, it's a little bit down the road, but like vertically, how do I integrate? And then how do I reconcile access to hay and other things? But can you just
sure,
give your 30-second so that everybody understands what you do?
Well, I first of all, I enjoyed the lead up to this, which is taking people down to the train station and crazy ideas. It's like, I'm not sure what I'm getting into here with this podcast, but actually, in all seriousness, I love this idea of the outsourced CTO for farmers. I think you guys are onto something incredibly cool with that, because as you talk to farmers, there's so many decisions that they're having to make all the time. And a huge chunk of those decisions are technology decisions. I think you guys are onto a format that's going to have a lot of success because of that. So anyway, I'm delighted to be a first guest on this thing. As far as HitchPin, you guys it was music to my ears when you were talking about the supply chain and digitization of the supply chain. and just sort of the massive change that we're going to see for producers. Kevin, I love your idea of how do you find that additional value in something. So what HitchPin is in very simple terms is a marketplace for ag products and services. So it's not just the ability to buy and sell things like hay and cattle and equipment, but also the services behind farming. So we think about custom harvesting, and we got Kevin has hay bales behind him, so the ability to do custom swathing and raking and baling. And we're really the first marketplace to combine those two things in the US in any kind of scale. And what we see long term is there's a direct benefit to the producer to be able to find the things they need quickly. As you guys know, most of the ag world is still heavily telephone based and heavily based on the network of the 5 people around you that have that product or service. And we're really just bringing kind of a whole new level of information across the entire ag spectrum. So that could be at the producer level, but I also like this conversation at the CPG level too. So it's like, how can you better connect that entire continuum in a digital marketplace? And that's what we're working on.
Cool. And you can download it right now.
It's available. It's live right now. We
on,
have
on Android and Apple.
Yeah, so it's on hitchpin.com and is our web app. And then we also have an iOS app, which if you look for HitchPin Agriculture, we've got 64,000 farmers already on it. They have listed products and services in 49 states already. We're still missing Hawaii. I've got to get a pineapple listed or something in Hawaii.
We have Kevin, you got anybody in Hawaii that reads your letter?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we got several.
Well, there's a lot of agriculture.
There's a ton. A lot of seed, seed people grow a lot of seed corn over there and seed beans.
Exactly. So I kind of tease, but Hawaii's going to be on the list. Maybe it's going to take a business development trip or something.
Yeah, I'm game for that.
To get it done. But no, we've been growing incredibly rapidly. Producers have listed a lot of products and services on HitchPin. And really, I mean, I think in all honesty, this digitization of the supply chain in food and ag, it's not a question of if it's going to happen, it's a question of when. And I think it's inevitable that this will be a really important topic, I think, for producers out there over the next 5 years. It's happened in all these other industries, taxis and hotels and airlines. I think the reason it hasn't happened in ag yet, sort of before HitchPin, is as you guys know, agriculture is so much more complicated than some of these other industries. All the variability of products and logistics and all that stuff, there's a lot more to it.
So who was your first customer and why did they buy?
Oh, I love this question. Our first customer, actually, this is indicative of how we view the world, was a 16-year-old who was just getting into farming. Actually comes from a small farm, but it's a farm that's not big enough for him to come back to it. He's a 4.0 student, state level wrestler, brilliant guy, could do anything he wants to do. And what he wants to do is farm. And they don't have the acres to support him coming back. So he was already, buying and selling hay, offering swathing services to sort of pay for the equipment that he was buying. And the counterparty to that was a 74-year-old producer that's on the other end of the spectrum. He wants to stay in production agriculture, but he doesn't have the labor that he needs. He doesn't really want to spend a whole bunch more money on equipment at this stage. And so that was our first transaction, the total tails of the bell curve. And actually that bell curve is expanded. We just had a producer the other day that 87 years old, Western Kansas, cannot find hay. His area was part of the big fire that came through a couple years ago. They rebuilt after the fire, and then the drought has just leveled those guys out there. He was at a sale barn selling off 2/3 of his herd, and somebody at the sale barn said, "Hey, is this because you can't find hay? And if so, you ought to check out this HitchPin." We found him hay, and he was able to save the rest of the third of the herd that he had. So we've got a huge variety.
The 16-year-old? Oh, I'm sorry, you switched.
No, that was just recently. That just happened just a couple of weeks ago. 87-year-old. So our producer base, the reason I bring that up is it's it's all up and down. It's not skewed toward a younger or an older demographic. As you guys know, if you want to get to the decision makers in ag, you've got to be able to build software that covers the spectrum of people.
And what was the biggest transaction you did?
I'll give you an example of people are, a lot of times they're buying and selling their products for the first time online. I mean, they've bought things on Amazon, they're used to that sort of thing, but to list a big part of their business. So one producer that I think is pretty fascinating. They bought a $3,000 service to test it out. And these are big producers out West. Then they said, okay, that worked really well. They sold a $6,000 service and that went well. And then they sold $500,000 in grain and that went well. And now they have a demand side listing right now for hay that's over $1 million. So you've seen them be on the buy side, the sell side, both products and services. And what we're seeing is as people get comfortable with these marketplaces, they tend to do more and more larger transactions.
Interesting.
Is that like I guess on eBay, you get ratings as a seller, as a buyer, do they get rated or?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
that's the cool part of it is, you think about the difference between a New York taxi cab. We'll pick on New York taxi cabs for a second versus an Uber, right? If you're in the taxi cab and the guy can be rude to you, the car can be dirty, it doesn't matter because chances are he's never going to see you again. But the reason I think Uber had success is because of that rating system. The guy being friendly to you, having a clean car, all that stuff matters. And I think the same is agriculture is such a relationship basis that covers a lot of business. It covers a lot of those needs. But when you're connecting people across bigger geographies that aren't in the local networks, that reputation matters a lot. And so if you've got somebody that's consistently delivering quality product at the right time, they're going to have a higher reputation score. They're going to be able to have some command on their pricing, to Kevin's point earlier about higher value. And then on the flip side of that, if you've got somebody that tries to, misrepresent a product, in a manual world, maybe they can do that to 2 or 3 other people before somebody really catches them. But in a world where every transaction has a reputation score associated with it, you push the bad actors out really fast. So you actually get to a much higher quality product much faster because of that.
Yeah, that's good. Makes sense.
Yeah.
You're located where? You're K-Stater, correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We're located in Manhattan, Kansas. If you look at the growth of our company, it started in the center part of the country and then it moved very quickly to the coast. And now we're going back through and filling density of supply and demand from the center out again. So we're proud to be here.
You started it?
I did. I came from a farming background. We grew up 1980s farming. So our neighbors were going out of business. I mean, it was a difficult time. We looked at farming differently, I think, is the reason that we survived. And, I think about my father, he's 75. At first he asked, why do you need a digital marketplace to sell ag products? I mean, that was his first question. And then because in years past, he would sell hay. Sometimes it sold fast. Sometimes it sold slow. Sometimes the guy didn't pay him for 6 months. And I kept thinking, how is this a thing? Like, this is the 21st century. How is this a thing? Well, he was one of the first guys to list products on HitchPin, listed it, it sold within a couple days, and the money was in his bank account right after the product had been delivered. And he's like, I get why you're doing this. And as an example, this year, all of sort of McKeeman Farms hay has all gone through HitchPin. And it's been fascinating because the buyers have been these folks that are really desperate for hay out West. And, the local networks that they've depended on calling their neighbors for hay, they don't work when everybody's in a drought situation. And so the arbitrage of that commodity from the East to the West this year has been unbelievable. So the guys out West are getting a better price than they could get locally. The guys in the East are getting a higher price than they could sell locally there too. And, again, we're seeing some farms stay in business because of that. that would not have stayed in business in an otherwise manual sort of network.
Are you posting, can people post jobs on there, or is it?
Yeah, no, I love it. So I kind of joke that if Amazon started with books, we started with something equally sexy, which is hay. But hay is a 14 to $20 billion industry, totally fragmented, no price transparency across the country. That's where we started. Then we added services. So, things like custom harvesting and other things. Then we've gone back and done, livestock and cattle being a big part of that, equipment. We've done some initial work in grain. So that'll be an interesting thing, Kevin, to get your thoughts on as we expand that side of it. And then the labor piece, I think, is one of those things that's coming. We have it as a category on HitchPin already. So you can, if you think about that sort of gig economy type thing that we've seen in all these other industries, I think that's going to be something that grows in a marketplace. Most of the labor aspects that we think about right now are actually a person and their machine showing up to get the job done. So it's hiring the service complete.
Okay.
And that's something that's common in agriculture, but there's been no clearinghouse to find the buyers and sellers for that.
And so if I'm a producer and I'm your dad and I'm so maybe it was easier to convince him, maybe it wasn't.
Sure. Yeah.
But
this is a pretty tough cookie.
But the adoption of new technology, sometimes I say invention of new technology is easy. Like at Kevin's conference, I said back in 1990, we decided we wanted to kill Saddam Hussein. So we spent 60 days building a bunker buster bomb and deployed it. So building technology sometimes can be quick.
Yeah.
Adopting technology is hard because it's, how do I use it? How does it fit in? Am I going to get ripped off? How do I know these people? So what do you, like, if you're thinking about your early adopters, what would you tell them what you're asking them to take a bet on you?
Yeah.
And what would you ask them to do before they make a final decision as to whether you're a good or bad solution for what they want to do?
I love this question. I think adoption, I assume adoption is going to be one of the main themes of this podcast, as it should be. And I think there's a number of different ways to look at it. First of all, as you guys know, there's a ton of fluff out there when it comes to technology. It's like some of these technologists are sitting in a room solving a problem that nobody has. And I think so you got to first start with the fundamentals of actually solving a real world problem, that there's a pain out there that the market is willing to pay for. And in our case, I mean, there's data and all kinds of other things that we can do long-term with HitchPin, but we're solving a very real need. If somebody needs hay, or if somebody needs to sell their cattle and they can get a higher price for it, there is a direct incentive for that to occur, right? And so the other thing that we did is we really put skin in the game ourselves. We said, okay, you can come to HitchPin, you can create a free account in a couple minutes. I mean, it's incredibly fast. And you can upload your product or service for free. So it's basically you now have an online store to be able to offer your product and service in a matter of minutes.
So is that like Shopify or?
Yeah.
Like,
so we have two things.
Etsy?
One is the ability to just create a listing. So I could create a grain listing, or I could create a cattle listing. But we also have a new feature called storefronts, which allows you to take all your listings and put them in one place. So you could have your own URL, hitchpin.com/iSelect or hitchpin.com/Van Trump, and then have all the products and services that you sell or buy categorized in that. And then people can follow that storefront. And I mean, it just opens up a whole new world of connecting with buyers and sellers. And so by offering, basically, you've offered them free marketing, you've offered them free payment processing to get all that stuff set up. They didn't have to go hire a web developer to do that. Because I mean, I think this is something you guys probably see. There's a lot of producers and a lot of technology companies that are trying to do these things. But even if you've got a great website, and even if you've got payment processing, you've spent the tens of thousands of dollars to get there, is anybody going to see your site? Does anybody know it even exists with the way search engines work today? And so by aggregating those into a marketplace, you bring much more visibility to these producers. So we offer all those things up, and then we say, throw it out there and see what happens. And then lo and behold, buyers come in, they see the product, they buy it. And when we transfer the money from the buyer to the seller, that's when there's a fee associated with it. Because it's, again, we've got skin in the game to see success happen. And then, that's how we make money. But at that point, both the buyer and the seller are very pleased with the process, because they've now been able to do something that they wouldn't have been able to do earlier.
So should I do a $2,000 transaction to figure out whether I really like this, or just put my website up, or
Well, so I'll give you an example. We had some guys that actually run a vet they have a vet supply business. As part of that, they have quite a cow herd that they keep every year. And every year they go and they haul 5 truckloads of animals to the sale barn, and they kind of accept whatever price the sale barn is going to give them that day, right? And it's a logistics problem. It's putting a lot of stress on the animal to move them there, and then they get moved out. And so I'll give you a prime example. The son, who's in his late 40s, said, "Hey, Dad, why don't we post this on HitchPin, see what happens?" So they knew the sale was coming up in 2 weeks. They posted it on HitchPin. The cattle sold within 24 hours. It doesn't always happen that fast, but it did. They sold really fast. They got a higher price than they would have at that spot market at the sale barn that day. And the buyer came and picked up the animals at the farm. So you put a lot less stress on the animal. There was a lot less logistics. And so it was one of those things. They used HitchPin as a test case, a zero risk test case, to try it out. It was a superior service, and lo and behold, they do it again. So it's that kind of, you got to earn their respect. You got to earn a producer's respect. You can't just demand it. And that's what we try to do.
Yeah, I would commend you on the fact that I think a lot of producers or people in agriculture, sometimes the business acumen, they may not have been taught as much or around as many people. But if you're going to have a website, or you're going to try and build your own brand, and you're going to try and go direct, you have to understand, there's in real world, in brick and mortar, there's destination locations, or there's high traffic transactional locations.
Yep.
And so when we're looking at buying buildings or putting different businesses in brick and mortar buildings, you have to ask, is this a destination location where people are going to drive regardless of where you're at to come get your product?
Yep.
Or do you have to be a transactional type business where you have to make sure you're in a key location where you're getting tons of foot traffic, because that's what's going to drive your business. So with what I'm seeing with HitchPin, you're going to be able to put a storefront now in a location that is going to have foot traffic and traffic going by your building on a daily basis. Or if you just put your own website out there, like Trevor saying, the odds of people finding you on a search engine or paying to get ranked anywhere in the top 5 pages, probably slim and none. So you need a place with some foot traffic if you're going to get some visualization. So the more, Trevor, I'm assuming more your network grows, the better it becomes, more foot traffic, self-fulfilling to some degree. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, cool.
And there's two elements that you bring up that I think are just absolutely spot on. And that is, one, when you've got traffic in there, you can also expose that traffic to things that are tangential to what they were originally looking for. So they come in looking for cattle, and we can intentionally say, well, have you thought about feed? Have you thought about hay? Have you thought about vet services? Those sorts of things. We call that engineered serendipity. So it's not by accident that you can do
other
that.
Things you may be interested in.
Yeah, well, exactly. And then the other cool part is, back to I love this example of the store that you're talking about, because what we're also seeing people do is they're putting a pin out for a demand listing, let's say a grain listing in a certain part of a state that says, hey, we want to try to draw grain from that location. And it's almost like a virtual terminal that they can put out there, in a matter of seconds, and move that terminal wherever they want. And then they can start to see, is there a supply there that we weren't able to access earlier? Before they do any kind of physical terminal build or anything like that, we've got some partners on the grain side that are doing that. And it's fascinating because you can move so fast and find those supply and demand pockets in a way that you can't do via the telephone.
And where do you want some customers? Like, you've got, I think you said you got 47 different categories maybe, or whatever.
No, we've got close to 300 different categories.
Yeah,
on
different.
HitchPin.
Where's
Yeah.
like, or where you're like, you know what? I don't know why this category is not taking off.
Yeah. Well,
There are a few of those, so we should get some of your cut. Let's get a few people out there listening to this to like try it out.
I love that idea. So our biggest categories are really the ones that this stuff takes time. The biggest categories that we have right now are hay, because we started with it, and because there's not a great liquid market for that stuff right now anyway. But cattle and equipment are fast coming. I mean, they're moving really quickly. The one, frankly, that I would just love to get your thoughts on because of the experience on this call is on the grain side, right? So it's a much more developed system, supply chain. There's professionals in this that do risk management and trading all the time, but I am still very interested in the physical movement of the grain into the feedlot, into the mill, into that bakery that's looking to source a particular, quality profile. I think there's something there. I think it's more complex than some of the other categories, but I also think there's a huge opportunity in that space too. So that would be an area that I would welcome.
So let me think through this a little bit and get a little geeky.
Yeah.
If we're on eBay, I use PayPal and UPS.
Yep.
But here, depending on the product, how it moves is unique to that channel.
Absolutely.
And so do you have to like pre-build transport in there, or do you just say, oh, by the way, we also, I mean, there's a workflow there.
You're talking about one of the most complex part of the ag supply chain, right? If this would be so easy if we were selling USB cables and we could drop ship them and it's done, right? Send it away in a box. What we're seeing, interestingly, is on some of our categories, I'll use hay again as an example. Not only are we connecting buyers and sellers that would not have met otherwise, but we're also connecting buyers with trucking resources that they would not have known otherwise. So almost 50% of our transactions, we're not only connecting the buyers and sellers, we're also connecting the third-party transportation logistics for it. And I think, as we go back to the grain piece, I'd love some thoughts on this, but whether it's grain or chickpeas or some of these other sort of more specialty crop things, the containerization of those items closer to the field level, and then the ability to move those containers, that packet of a particular commodity at a particular quality level, I think that gets really interesting down the road. And so, having
there was a startup, I can't remember the name of it, but we looked at a startup that was unit containerizing at the
360. What are they? Something 360. He's been in my office a couple of times, but yeah, they had rail cars that they were placing in fields, and you just load them with whatever variety it may be, and then you could stack and store it. They'd come then take it, load it, transport it to a holding facility, or you can hold it on your own farm or your own operation. So see, but in the ag world, Carter, like like instead of BYOB, bring your own beer. I mean, it's BYOT, bring your own trailer, and it's pretty universal. It's pretty universal shit. Guys got their own, everyone kind of knows we got to go pick up our own. Yeah. We're buying cattle, we got to go get them. And if we're buying equipment, we got to go get it.
What's really
is that
cool,
like the Uberization here? I mean, do you need like a Uberized trucking fleet?
The logistics side, the third-party logistics side is an area that's going to grow tremendously on a marketplace like this, because sometimes you bring your own trailer, right? And that works. We've had transactions as close as 7 miles apart. So the neighbor didn't know the other neighbor was selling something, which is what you want to see in a marketplace. But we've had transactions that are 1,500 miles apart, where these guys would have never known each other. We had to figure out, we had to help the buyer figure out transportation logistics to get it there. So I think that's a fascinating area, that logistics piece. And it's one of the reasons why we don't already have something at a massive scale in ag doing this. Like the logistics are huge for the.
You do have sales. I mean, I've seen it. Like, here's the trade that we're talking about. And if you got a question, here's the phone number. So you've got your customer success team is
we've got, it can be digital, it can be over the phone. I mean,
humans.
Well, we
Someone
find, yeah, real humans with a real phone number. We don't hide the phone number, but that's important because what we find is, if you're going to drop $50,000 or $100,000 on a transaction and it's your first time doing it, again, this is different than buying, something on eBay. We're not buying purses on
And who do
eBay.
you have on the phone? Just some people in India?
Well, no. So we've got no. They're all U.S. based. They're all
All
Kansas
farm
based.
kids?
All farm kids. Oh, I got to tell you, these are tough farm kids. They know the language. What's fast? You guys will find this kind of fascinating. We actually have people that will call us up to ask us if somebody else, not on HitchPin, but somebody else that they have seen on Craigslist or some other place, is legitimate. Like it's weird to me that they're calling us to ask if somebody else is legitimate. But here's the cool part. Our team actually knows, because they actually know. They're like, no, that is clearly a scam. Do not go to Facebook and do that. And so, I mean, that's the sort of stuff that you earn respect with. And then once you've had that successful transaction, and once they trust the marketplace, and once they got paid fast and the money's in their account, that second transaction doesn't require a phone number or a phone call sometimes. Or, like you have brought them into a place where they trust it, and all of a sudden they can now self-serve in a lot of ways. So it's, a lot of tech companies try to skip the human element at the beginning. That doesn't work in the sort of business that we're in. But long term, I think folks like efficiency. And if they can make a purchase at 3 a.m, while they're sitting in laying in bed thinking about feed for the next couple of weeks, and they can do that asynchronously with somebody, that's pretty cool, right? And we're already seeing that happen.
And you got some good stuff behind you. You want to explain it? You got a couple pictures.
Oh yeah. So this is just a example of our live app right now. And I just pulled this one up, but it happens to have a tractor for sale for $150,000. It got some equipment on it, but each one of these pins, these are all live, represents a different product or service. So you see, you got a welding hat there. So people that support the ag supply chain, the welders, the truckers, all that, they can list their services. You've got poultry, you got trucking, cattle, veterinary services on there. So it's pretty cool, because as you search through the map, you can discover things around you that you may not even know were there, either geography based or in other searchable ways. So yeah, it's amazing. Like once you
Is that also you flying, or what's?
Oh yeah.
I need to tell me about the rest.
That's a piece of farm equipment, by the way. My dad and I are both pilots, and that's a bush plane. It's nothing fancy. It's like a Jeep with wings. But it's a lot of fun because you can go out and check fields with it and land in crazy places that you would not normally, a pilot would not normally land. But my kids are above. They've been flying since they were little. So
Cool.
it's one of the reasons I love living in this part of the world, is you have the freedom to do some of those things.
Trevor, what round raises are you in? What are you guys doing on the raise side?
We've had successful rounds already. And I'll give you maybe kind of a quick backstory on that. I'm Kansas farm kid, did ag policy in DC for a member of Congress for a number of years. So I kind of see both sides of that. This is my third tech company. So I have the scars from, how hard it is to build things, but I also understand the opportunity with that. I was actually doing a mid-career master's at MIT thinking about HitchPin, and I met with these investors and they said, we love this. Marketplaces are going to change every industry. We know nothing about agriculture, but we know marketplaces are going to change it. And that's what they told me. And then they immediately said, you got to move to San Francisco where there's money and talent. And you guys, I don't know if you can see the chip on my shoulder from the video conference here, but I said, actually guys, we're going to move this to a place where I can hire people that understand agriculture, where they can speak the language, when they can take that tough customer call and know exactly what's happening. We raised our first round of funding in 12 days. So the idea that there's no money and talent in the center part of the country is just absolutely absurd. And we've had successful rounds after that. Our last finished round was an internal only round. So all the investors wanted to put more money in, which is always a great sign. And so I had a couple of people on the perimeter, and it's actually very similar to what you guys were talking about earlier, which is how do you engage people further up the supply chain? And I had a gentleman that had sold a bakery for 100 million, and we wanted to have him as an investor. So we created a convertible note round for new investors that we want to add that have particular expertise to add to the supply chain discussion. We're going to fill that really fast. And then eventually we'll do a larger scale up round after that. But I'm really using the convertible note round that we have right now to be very selective in folks that bring value beyond the cash, right? They have experience in the industry, they've got connections, and they really, there's a soul behind what we're building here. So it's important that they be doing this for the right reason.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's good stuff.
Yeah,
sure. Can we wrap things up a little, Carter?
Yeah, I just geek out here a little bit. The sort of what's going to happen in the supply chain. So you can almost imagine if, like, we get back to economics here, is all the hedging that goes on and all the trouble that people are having in terms of keeping the farm up and running into problems where hay's not available. These are all sort of like these are all solvable things.
absolutely.
And we might pretend that that's like, if you add up all of the hedging that goes on and sort of say, what part of this hedging is because we can't coordinate the signals of supply and demand, and where are the arbitrage that's not being used? Like, as we're talking about, hey, you add that all up. I'm not positive what the number is, but let's pretend for a second that it's like $500 billion. I mean, it's not a small number.
Correct.
And go back to tech, back in the 70s in tech, we did everything with punch cards and by hand. And in the 80s, we did computer chips. In the 90s, we did the internet. In the 2000s, we did mobile, and we did SaaS. And now we've changed business models, and you have Airbnb. We're on that same path here in agriculture. Absolutely. And people sort of say, how do you get more profitability in agriculture? You take out all of that waste occurring through poor integration and price signals in that hedging and such. And so we started using ChatGPT internally a year ago. And the idea was that we look through 4,000 startups and stick it in a database and don't do anything with it. So like I said, what can we do with that? So we crammed that in ChatGPT and made it so we could start asking it questions. And then we said, Beck said this, like, well, can we stick our data into there too? And can we make this available to startups and the farm gate? And so we're sort of working through that. And then Microsoft came to us and they said, we don't know shit about agriculture, and we don't understand this trucking thing, and we think we can do route optimization, but we don't know. So the other thing here, Kevin, that I'm sort of excited about is the back end of what Trevor is doing. The data that he's got is a signal for us at iSelect of where the new market opportunities are. And in some ways, what we're going to start trying to think through is, like, if Trevor's in there working through the systems and hay's moving great, okay, cool, but this other thing's not moving great, that then tells me there's demand for this to get the price signals right. If I'm thinking economics way, get the price signals right, the market demand right, the friction, remove the friction out of the system. But it's specific. There is some soy that's got to move in this kind of truck to this place. So it's not like you can just digitize it like you're at Google. There's actually physical supply chain that needs to be put together. And so the breakthrough here that I think we're starting to see the signals of here are taking the practical reality of, I'm a producer and I want to get screwed by these market signals and inefficiencies. And I want profitability. But I need you people on the innovation side to give me a tech solution and a physical solution. And I think we can start mapping together the sort of the kinds of things that Microsoft wants to do in the back end to make some of the back end stuff easier. Trevor's out there getting the initial demand, and this is to me, this is like 10 years from now, people are like, I don't know who all these people are, but thank God, because my farmer profitability is up. The 16-year-old will now be 26.
And
He'll be running his own 8,000 acres that he was able to use because he
which he wasn't able, which he wouldn't have been able to get into.
Wouldn't have been able to. He's gonna be tech enabled, tech forward. He's gonna be using this stuff. He's gonna be doing what he likes to do, farming. But he's gonna be using the best of technology and robotics, things like that. So it's this game is coming together. It's coming together quick.
Yep.
It needs investment and it needs customers.
I think in 5 years we will look back on this and we will go, this was inevitable. Like, of course, not everybody sees it yet, but it will be exactly as you say, Carter. This is coming, and then on two fronts. Like, one, the price signals are interesting for existing commodities, but something that I think is relevant to your podcast is, how does a producer get exposed to new technologies that are coming out, right? So how do they find that new soil sensor or that new robotic sprayer, or, whatever it is? And what we're seeing on HitchPin is we're getting all kinds of tech companies coming to us saying, can we list our new product or service on HitchPin? Because we want the producer that's coming in to try to sell cattle to see that, oh, well, there's a new AI service in the area that they could do. So that's exciting about a platform not only connecting existing supply and demand, but also being able to connect a new style of technology or a new opportunity to producers, and not in a philosophical way, but in a way they can actually purchase, test out, see if it works, and then if it does, continue to utilize. So that's the stuff that I get excited about.
And Kevin, a little bit as we sort of explore the CTO thing, I think our job here, and this is kind of help that you need to give me, is like, I'm not here saying this will definitively happen, but there'll be a ground game here of people skin in the game, really using the product, making it better.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll take the opposite argument on the AI side with agriculture. No, I'm not going to take an opposite. I'm just going to say this.
And I was using I was talking about embryo transfer. Just so you know, that's the AI that we care about. There's AI in other places, but I was talking embryo.
Yeah, and Carter's talking chat GTP and things of that nature. What we've seen for years, so in the trading world, everybody, when computers, I was at the forefront of online trading and, computerized trading models and everything else, and it was going to change trading and change the world, and shit, it never did. And I heard the same thing in agriculture and farming. And some of my biggest investment mistakes were not understanding that in agriculture specifically, a big time in trading, but a lot in agriculture, it's a combination of art and science. Mm-hmm. Okay, getting a plane off the ground is science. Getting my farms to work in Brazil or Argentina is science and a lot of art. Yeah, a lot of art. And that's where I think the producer, we go and listen to a lot of this shit out of California or Silicon Valley or some of the other, and you hear a lot on the tech side. And I talk to a lot of ag tech startup people, and they think, oh, it's this easy, it's this easy, it's this easy, but it's not. No. And what we've learned is, if you're a fourth generation farmer or fifth generation, your dad and his dad and his dad have taught and passed down a shitload of art.
Absolutely.
And that art is so valuable.
Absolutely.
And so when you try new technology and it leaves art out of the equation, that's what I'm saying. AI isn't going to teach you how to hit a baseball like Barry Bonds. I'm just saying there's a lot of art. There is science involved in the swing of a golf club or a baseball bat, but there's also a lot of art. And similarly with farming and agriculture, you would really be surprised at how much art's involved out on the farm that a lot of folks just discount. They don't understand the years and years of working and understanding their ground, their soil, the way it drains, the way the rain's affected, different things. Different nuances. And I get smoked all the time thinking, we'll just hire some people to go out there and do what that person did. Yeah, it never works like that. So,
that's the subtlety of what does every startup need? A customer? Because really, if they got a customer, then they did something to make that customer happy, which
Yep.
means they figured out the puzzle pieces between art and science and productivity.
Yeah,
And
right. I agree.
I love the way you describe that, Kevin, because that's exactly how we view the world. Like when I talk about the digitization of this stuff, it's not a cold science. Like every time we add a new category, we've got producers in talking about like what is the pain point that you have, like, you know, what we really got to understand the human side of this. And you know, I think it's fascinating when you think about information movement and the sort of asymmetry of information that has been involved in agriculture. I mean, that's what makes good trades, right? Is asymmetry in information. And I think what we're trying to do is not necessarily take the human element or the base knowledge out of it. We're just trying to connect these people in a new way.
For sure.
That essentially they can now leverage that knowledge that they have, but have more information about where the market signals really are. And so I agree 100%. This is not taking the art out of it. You're just giving a new tool in the tool belt.
Yeah, you guys for sure. I agree.
For the producer. So
you probably know Dowd. You know Greg Dowd?
I have met. Yep, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. K-Stater.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's. I mean, you know, just if maybe a real quick thing, like we care. I think the reason behind HitchPin is, again, my dad would sell hay, not get paid, right? And I kept thinking we've got to have a better way. So I think in general, for us, it's about the producer and about their connectedness into the supply chain. But I will also say, maybe for the broader podcast listener here, we've got to figure some of these things out. I was just on a webinar a little bit ago, and it had a trade ambassador on it. And, you know, we've got over 300 million people that are now food insecure. And when you go back and look at what caused the Arab Spring and some of those things in 2012, food insecurity was a big part of that. And so I think from a producer standpoint, we care about the guy on the farm, but at the macro level, we've just got to figure out a more efficient way of moving this stuff, a more efficient way of producing it, of transporting it. Like all this stuff has to be more efficient, or we're going to have a world where there's going to be a lot of people hungry, and hungry people do desperate things.
Yeah.
So it becomes a national security issue, I think, to think about this food supply chain in a bigger sense. And all the producers that we talk to, they get it. I mean, the bottom line is the dollar on their farm. That drives their decisions, but they're also farming because there's a bigger, there's a broader reason to do this. And, I think they take that feeding the world pretty seriously. And frankly, if HitchPin doesn't do this, I just pray there's other technology companies working on this. I've got 4 kids, and I don't want them to, humans have been fighting over oil and land for a long time. We don't need to be fighting over food.
That's why I brought up Dowd, because I know Carter spent some time out there with their think tank group at Aimpoint. And I think from a broad perspective, they're working through some of those thoughts, right, Carter? I mean, when you've been out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen some recent stuff. Dowd has for a long time been talking about Brazil and Russia aligning. They just signed an agreement to figure out how to do exchanges.
Yep.
We've had some inside information that suggests that China's buying a lot of Bitcoin and doing a lot of origination Bitcoin that might be used for trade settlement. There's some further conversations really about Iran getting involved in that. If you start seeing something out of like UAE, because UAE's got a lot of natural gas, so Brazil's got no fertilizer. Belarus has the fertilizer they need. If those guys all get together, I'm not positive which way it goes. I don't know whether that's good for us, meaning like the whole rest of the world's like, well, we don't really want to be part of that team, and they're going to do their own thing. So we want to source from the US in some way. I mean, US is always best productivity, best yield, best, it's way ahead of everybody else. So there's a lot of reason for people to be in our stream.
Yeah.
But we might, those decisions you think about for this next crop, you're probably in the August. Last time I talked to Craig Dowd, you might start seeing some major stuff going down by July, August. But we could be in a situation in September where we're sort of looking at ourselves and saying, Brazil is going to satisfy China. We're not going to do any more into China food-wise. and that there's this weird alignment going on, and that we're rushing around trying to figure out how to fiddle with demand and fertilizer. And this is something Aimpoint's been talking about for a while.
Yeah.
But the signals there's some recent signals that they are in fact lining up, at least on how to trade, de-dollarize trade between Brazil and China.
And and I would add, I think, we saw the pandemic. We had producers calling us during the pandemic, specialty crop growers, that said, I can't get my stuff into the supply chain at all. I'm going to be one guy said, I'm going to be sitting on an expensive pile of compost if we don't figure this supply chain out. Then you got Ukraine, but frankly, the math, and you guys probably know the math even better than I, we're going to see these supply chain shocks for the next 10 years or longer as the population goes up. And Carter, to your earlier point about how dietary changes take place, I mean, we're like one swine flu away from a major catastrophe in one of these countries. And so, I mean, these supply shocks are here to stay, I believe. And so anytime you can connect things more efficiently, you're going to help mitigate risk.
Yeah, I think if the supply chain's more dynamic, I early in my career, I did a lot of lean manufacturing, Six Sigma stuff, and we had plants at Boeing that we thought were a capacity. Once we did Lean Six Sigma through them, we found out that we had twice as much capacity. And so what that means here is we get better signals in the supply chain to reconcile. We actually may realize we have a lot more capacity and that we've been wasting capacity because of these arbitrage disconnects. So
I totally agree. And I, sort of last point on that is agriculture has always pushed towards this mainframe, this aggregated into a mainframe supply and then redistributed out has been, the how a lot of agriculture has worked in the past. If you look at other industries, that lasts for a while, but they eventually get broken into a network, and the network ends up being more powerful than the mainframe. The point-to-point connections are more powerful, and that's exactly where ag is going. You just need a digital clearinghouse to be able to make those connections.
Well, this is a big, I know they were, this could be like Joe Rogan. We go on for 3 hours. But if you go back and you remember the big steel mills all getting sort of disrupted in the 80s and then moving to mini mills, and that was sort of a movement towards just in time. Look, I got a lot of friends, and you remember Kevin, I think at FarmCon, me and Soren got a little cross about 5 years ago when we were talking about supply chains here, but it's the concept of moving away from big steel, which I almost consider ABCDs to be sort of more to a mini mill concept in which they're more directly integrated with supply chain around specialty. That's how the car industry sort of shifted away from, our cars used to get rusty and be crappy because they all had crappy steel. And then they moved to mini mills, they moved to just in time. And now we have cars that last 20 years and start to get rust. And so those are real shifts that go on that deal with real stuff.
Yep.
And I personally think that we may be moving into a mode where, maybe you get Lucy on here and we start talking, she'd probably got to convince us that Cargill's got to rule the day here, but there's a game going on here, I think, in which Cargill and ADM could really see someone move their cheese pretty dramatically. They will survive it, but and then the other shoe to drop is if Ukraine goes the wrong way, or we get distracted in Ukraine and something goes on in Taiwan, there's just a lot of stresses coming in the summer that anyway.
I think the stuff that you guys are talking about on this podcast is going to be more, I think we're going to see more investment in the ag space and in technology related to the food supply chain than we see in many other industries. Like this.
I got to say this out loud. I'm sorry, because this is frustrating the Jesus out of me. Is I keep calling people up and talking about the opportunity here, and they're like, "Well, venture is down."
Yeah,
venture's down in Silicon Valley, but it was never up in ag. And the producers, I'm talking to some of the ag credit people, and they're like, farmers are game on.
Yep, totally.
and that's why we created this new fund. Kevin and I created this new fund. This is the perfect time
Absolutely.
for producers to lean in and say, we got resilient farm kids. The world needs U.S. production. We're
100%.
starting to understand how technology can help us. It's not so obscure.
This window here is going to create some of the best performing companies in the food and ag space that we've seen.
Companies started in this year, last year, and next year.
This is huge. I mean, you look at the top venture backed companies, and I'll be fast about this. One of the only profitable ones is Airbnb. It started in the middle of a housing crisis.
Yeah.
And they're rocking and rolling. So
what's going to happen, you're going to go to MIT 10 years from now, and they're going to say, what you need to do is you need to move your ag tech startup to Manhattan, Kansas, because that's
well, I go back and look. If you go back and watch that series I told you guys before, The Food That Built America, on the History Channel, it's badass, but it's really the late 1800s to the early 1900s where your Hershey's, Kellogg's, those Post. I mean, those families are still some of the wealthiest families in the United States and in the world. And it was a period of time, though, where food and agriculture dramatically changed. Carter opens up with plant-based cheese. I'm telling you, we're in the same type of space right here where agriculture and food, the demand, the health side of it, everything is going to shift and change. And I think, that's why I say we're in the right place. Now, if you can just get your bearings about you and kind of get, just position yourself correctly. And that's why we like the fund. And to talk on the fund just a second, it's just basically you're throwing $5,000, $10,000 so Carter gets 4,000 new ag tech startups, whatever they get, come across their plate. They weed that down. They pick a few they invest in. And then we throw $5,000 or $10,000 at each one as they come down the pipe. I mean, it isn't like you're not betting the farm on any one thing. You'll have, I think Andy's in 49 or 50 of them he's invested in right now, everyone that comes down the pipe. And, and then you can decide later on, and then if it's a C round or a D round, you can you can throw more at it or not throw more.
Yeah. So any accredited investor can invest. They can invest as little as 25,000. We will then invest in 20 of our next startups. And then as they grow up, so they'll be young, they'll sort of look a little younger than Trevor's here.
Yeah.
Or like Trevor's. And and then a year from now, if they're taking off, you will have the choice to say, what? I'd like to put a lot more behind that.
Yeah.
But you'll be behind it. You'll hear the information about it. And
we're hoping people will become customers of that company.
Yeah.
And then they can decide for themselves if they like it or don't like it.
That was one of the reasons we did this, is we had Organics customers.
Yeah.
How can I invest in this, or how can I invest in these other companies? And we're like, oh yeah, we should do that. So we set it up so that it's easy to invest. It's straightforward. I think you can sign up now, and we probably need Trevor's dev team to help us make it even smoother. But you can sign the thing up in a short moment. We should put a storefront on Trevor's thing. Yeah. You can sign up maybe in about 10 minutes. The hardest thing is you got to put your W-2 up or something like that.
But you got to say your net worth. I mean, or you got to make over 100. I don't know what it is.
You got to be accredited. So I know I'm making it a little simple, but the basic idea is invest as little as 25K in 20 companies, see how they mature. If it's harvesting well, put some more money in.
Well, and I would say two things, if you give founders that really care about the customer base that you're talking about, when there's success, those founders want to see that value come back to real customers, to real producers. That's a meaningful thing for people that are in this stuff for the right reason. So I think you'll see you'll see startups and founders gravitate towards that because they want to see something come back into the communities that they're trying to serve anyway.
Yeah. So the other thing on this is we can't take more than 250 people into the fund, and that's starting to grow, and we're closing in late May on it and start investing. We'll likely do it again, but now's the time to just, here's the hard plug.
And-
download the app, go to the web, decide what you want to do.
And we're not allowing anyone to sell on this podcast, but obviously Carter's selling his ass
Yeah,
off.
I'm selling. We're not selling it.
No, we're kidding. We're just saying, hell, it's an avenue. It's a channel. So I think that was great. I think including, so we're going to try and divide the podcast up into 3 segments, an A, B, and a C, where A, Carter and I talk, B, Trevor and all of us talk, and then C, we wrap up with Carter and I. But shit, I think Trevor was great having his intel.
Thank you.
In the third phase of this thing. So I don't know, Carter. I don't have a whole lot left.
I think it's great.
Yeah,
Should we grade ourselves on the first one of these?
Well, I wanted to just underline one last thing that Kevin said that I thought was really interesting. You look at those companies, the ones that we call the ABCs now, and you think about all the wealth that was created in all of that. All of those were basically supply chain plays, right? They had a terminal on a river, or they had a facility near a rail line. It was a physical thing. And so I think what's fascinating is, I think when we talk about this digitization of agriculture, it's no different than those old supply chain terminals. It's just a digital representation of it versus a physical. And that change is going to happen even faster because those things can happen fast. And so I'm looking forward to future podcasts where you have other people on that are talking about this, because I think this is going to be one of those things that just the amount of value created in this space, to Kevin's point earlier, is going to be unbelievably significant.
Yeah.
We were born with one mouth and 2 ears, so I'd love to hear what people think.
Yeah.
We're going to try to have some good guests on, and new startups that reach across the whole space. So I'm happy, Trevor, that you were our first one. And
Thank you. It was a joy.
Keep doing it on a regular basis. So if anybody needs or is interested, it's HitchPin.com, right?
Yep. HitchPin.com, and then HitchPin on iOS.
Perfect. And that's
Love to
great.
have you on.
All right. Appreciate it. Go K-State, right?
Hey, we like that.
All right, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
All right. See you, Carter.